Hello, everyone. We're going to talk about the flight to safety, COVID-induced changes in the intensity of status quo, preference, and voting behavior. The team is made up by Ricardo Navarrete, Regina Contreras, and myself, Sergio Chavez. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the context of the paper. And the author focuses on analyzing the elections of 2020, which was when COVID struck in the USA, specifically of the candidates of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And let's learn how to do the levels of anxiety caused by the pandemic affected this outcome. Also, there's an important concept called flight to safety, which is a term used by the authors to describe the behavior of voters' decision in the face of uncertainty. Let's talk a little bit about the candidates. First, we have Joe Biden, which embodies safety, while Bernie Sanders embodies disruption. Also, Joe Biden represented the status quo of his message was to return political back to normal. On the other hand, Bernie Sanders was pushing the limits of politics as he wanted to change the power structure in America. Lastly, when there is a crisis and uncertainty like the pandemic, people who likely to choose the candidate that represents the status quo.
So the main concern of the paper is whether anxiety affects or not the voters' behavior. Of course, mainly focused in 2020 democratic elections in the USA. Next, please. The base of these studies is that voters care less about the specific position of a candidate given some policy dimension when facing crisis. Instead, anxious voters prioritize candidate attributes like leadership and strength, and mainly safety, which is the balanced term in its utility function. Next, please.
So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the methods and the data that the author used. So the first method that he used was a linear regression. This linear regression predicted Bernie Sanders' votes as a function of exposure to the COVID virus. This is based on the number of cases reported in the designated market area. The second method that he used was also a linear regression, but he used a defensive estimator. And to implement this defensive estimator, each county was categorized as exposed or insulated based on the number of cases reported in the designated area. Based on these two models, he then created a third model that was a generalized model, and he analyzed the case of the 2020 French municipal elections. Next, please. So what were the main findings that this model found? Are that the results are consistent with the theorized flight to safety mechanism, where the pandemic altered the relative appeal of mainstream and anti-established candidates. So what does this mean? This means that in times of crisis and where there is higher levels of anxiety, as the pandemic was in the 2020 elections in the USA, people will vote towards a candidate that represents more the status quo, which in this case, as we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, was Joe Biden. So the 2020 elections indeed was affected by the levels of anxiety, and voters chose more or appeal more to Joe Biden. Next, please.
So finally, according to the results of the paper, we like you to ask, can political candidates manipulate social anxiety in order to achieve more convenient outcomes? That's all.
Thank you.